Hey guys, welcome to the Save Continue podcast, where every other week we get together and talk about video games and video game related stuff. As always, I'm Shanee Howard, and with me is Ryan Robinson.
What up? 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 What up?
That's enough of that.
Okay.
That's fine. That's
Okay.
enough. What have you been playing lately?
Um. Well, I have been playing a lot of Yakuza 5, which I'm steadily working my way through that series. I thought that I would go to Yakuza 6 immediately after, but then I remembered that I have recently purchased Scarlet Nexus, so I just started that today. But yeah, Yakuza 5.
Nexus, a part of the franchise?
No, Scarlet Nexus is a completely different
I
thing.
was I don't know what Scarlet Nexus is, so I
Scarlet Nexus is this very, very it's one of those, it's an anime styled character action video game where you play as one of two members of this. What you play as one of two characters who are members of this like elite force of individuals who fight monsters to defend humanity. Monsters are being called others, capital O, others. And every member of this group has like a unique power. Like some of them can turn their skin into armor. Others have pyrokinesis. Others have telekinesis, and things like that. And so each level involves you taking like going into the map and like killing the monster that they tell you to while fighting other monsters on the
the other.
while fighting other monsters on the way. And it's really neat. Like there are two playthroughs from what I can tell. I don't remember their names, but there's a guy and there's a girl that you can play as, and I'm playing as the guy right now, and his power is telekinesis, and the way that the combat works is you have your melee attack, which he uses a katana for his melee attacks, and then you also have your telekinesis, and the combat system works as such a way that like you can blend the two together. So like while you're slashing with your sword, you can hold R2 on the controller, and that will have him grab a nearby object and throw it at the monster as part of the combo, and then you can resume attacking. And then you
So
go.
you're a Jedi.
No, cooler than a Jedi, honestly. Just because
Rude.
Jedi's are. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into my opinions about Star Wars here, but I will say that what's neat is that you have different. There are different people who can go on missions with you, and you're all linked by this. There's like, I can't remember the system. It's SAS. I don't remember what SAS stands for, but essentially, it makes it so that
Say yes.
your party members can lend you their powers in different ways, alongside in addition to using them themselves. Like so if you bring the girl who has pyrokinesis with you, she can imbue your sword with fire and make it so that you're doing fire attacks. Or there's this girl who can move like really really fast, and so you can borrow her power, and then you can move fast, and everything around you slows down, and you can usually combine like powers to do different attacks.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Yeah.
There's some sort of there seems to be some sort of relationship building mechanic that plays directly also into the action gameplay. Like the closer the stronger your bond with the character, the more effects that you can activate by using their powers. I'm very early on in the game because, like I said, I just started it today, but so far
I like
really like it.
I like the idea that variance and being able to play based off of combining with other people's.
Yeah, it's a really neat game. I played the demo for it about 2 weeks ago, which is like the first demo that I've played since like I don't know, since like the 360, I guess. Um, but it gave me a really good idea of how much I would like the game, and like ever since then, Ever since I played the demo, like I've been really excited about this game. And like I said, I just finished Yakuza 5, and so I think before I jump to the next entry in the Yakuza series, I'm going to play through Scarlet Nexus and get what I can from that, and then go through the rest of the Yakuza games. But like this is something that I'll cover in our discussion in a little bit. But like every Yakuza game, with the exception of one of them, has made me cry at least once. Uh, like the themes in Yakuza are so like it's weird, right? Because I think that like Yakuza, like in terms of like the way that it presents itself most of the time, is very over the top, and in a lot of ways is kind of cartoonish. But I feel like Yakuza as a franchise more realistically portrays like the human range of emotion than any other video game I ever played. Um, and it's refreshing because like that's not something that you find a lot, especially like in action in games in the action adventure category. But yeah, so I that's one of the reasons I've been really enjoying them, and it like, looks like I'll be going to Yakuza 6 within the next week or so, and then we'll see where that goes because it's going to be Judgment or maybe like a Yakuza Like a Dragon. We'll see. And also, I've actually been playing a little bit of Red Dead Online as of late.
How's that been?
It's been nice because like in the early days of Red Dead Online, well, when Red Dead Online first started, there was like so in the single player component of Red Dead Redemption 2, like cities were like very very vibrant and like there's all these people and like they're like NPCs like doing their thing or whatever. But when Red Dead Online first started, there was like none of that. And like you would have the towns from the single player game, but they were all like basically empty, and it was like very weird because like they were empty with the exception of like you'd be able to find the NPC that sells you shit and there's the barber NPC, but like every other NPC was just like absent, and it was like just the weirdest thing. And also, but like the big thing about the experience though was like there's a lot of griefing, and to an extent there still is quite a bit of griefing on there. But now I feel like I'm more often than not, if I run into another player online, like we'll usually like ignore each other. But it's like actually been like it's been a good game to like kind of just Red Dead Online has been like a really good way to like kind of just chill out because like
Nice decompress game.
yeah, because like because you know you don't really actually have to do anything specifically. And like I've been spent like a lot of it's been me like you know I'll like ride around on the horse and like see different things, or like I'll go fishing, and like it's all like very chill. And then like if I happen to feel like it, then I can just jump into like a mission you know where I have to fight somebody or whatever. But like overall it's like it's got very chill vibes for the most part, because like there's not a lot of like a lot of the sound in that game is just like background nature noises. There's not like there usually isn't music playing in that game. So a lot of it is just like the sound of like birds singing, or like if you're near like a river, like there's the sound of the river, and it's very soothing. It's just the only thing about it is that game is so fucking massive, like in terms of file size, that like for as long as Red Dead Redemption is installed, like it severely hampers like how much other stuff I can install, because like I'm trying to keep my hard drive like below 75% full, but Red Dead Redemption is 100 gigabytes, and so
Yeah.
everything else gets moved around. And yeah, but yeah, that's basically what I've been playing. I've been playing a little Knockout City here and there with my wife. We played a little bit today. So,
My wife.
my wife, Borat. And I think that's all I've been. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, and Guilty Gear Strive. I've been playing a lot of that. I'm still garbage at it. But it's fun. It's a great fighting game. It's probably the best fighting game that I've played in the last few years. So I'm excited to play more of it. Um,
Nice. And that means a lot because now you're more into fighting games than you've ever been. Uh,
yeah.
so I've had a lot of life stuff going on, but Berto hasn't really been playing a lot of WoW. Some of it's because we recently bought a house this week.
Yeah. Congratulations.
And thank you. And he just knew that there was gonna be a lot of time he wasn't gonna be able to dedicate to raids, so he hasn't joined any raiding parties. And like just like the things that he's doing, he's kind of like tapped out. There's not like a whole lot of things for him to work for, so he's been playing the Switch more, and he has started playing Fire Emblem Three Houses. And he's played Awakening, and I think that's the only other Fire Emblem game he's played. But with things going on, I haven't been working as much, and I've been watching him play Fire Emblem, and so it got me into playing it again. And I played it here and there because like one of my friends got it, and I think I've mentioned it on and off the show. Like I'll play a couple hours a week, nothing really intense, just kind of going and checking on my characters.
Yeah.
And it's just been really fun watching him play. And there not a whole lot of games recently where he like asks me questions about it or things that I know. So it's been really fun being able to give him tips and tricks and like, hey, like these are things that I just don't even care about because there's just so many things to do in that game. But there is a mechanic that has always bothered me, and I'm on my 5th playthrough. I've played this game a lot. I also accidentally deleted most of my save data, and that kind of killed me. But so like
that's drama, baby.
In this, because I was trying to free up some spots for him to save things, and I deleted the wrong things. But with this, whenever I start a map, like you pick your units and they put them on the map, but I only saw them like I couldn't figure out how to move them besides when you first pick them. So what I would do sometimes, if I would pick a character and I put it in a spot I didn't want, I would take it off and then put a character I don't want, get the person I want to where they were, and then take off the character and then put somebody else in that spot. And that's the only way I could figure out how to move things. Yeah, whenever you're just checking out the map, like before you start the fight, you can click on them and like swap them around. And I never realized that ever. I'm on my 5th playthrough, and I never realized how to even just like stack characters. And because of him playing it for the first time and figuring that out, it's been a game changer. And so I've been playing it a lot more as well. And it's really funny because there's a lot of characters that I don't give a shit about and I find very boring.
Like who? Put him on blast.
Linhardt. I don't care about you, you sleepy bastard. I just don't.
He's just so sleepy and stupid.
Lorenz, like, and your purple, like stupid haircut, and you love the tea. I think the tea parties is like super annoying. I love the Tomy games. Tea parties, I find them so boring.
Like, who's doing tea parties now? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, come on. Come on, Anime Hogwarts.
Yeah.
What is this?
Anime Hogwarts, yeah.
Yeah, no. So I'm playing that. I've also really, really gotten into Star Wars lore. We finally got to we've been watching Star Wars Clone Wars, and it has been such a bog. I was really excited to see what happens between episode 2 and 3, and everyone talked about how great, even before they made the last season, but the last 2 seasons, like I think 5 and 6 were of Clone Wars, and then 7 came out when they redid it, and everyone said how amazing it was, and I have not been enjoying my time until recently. It has gotten better. I also started watching Rebels at the same time because I hate myself, and it's very confusing going to the 2 different timelines, or time of events.
Sure.
Because I know you said earlier you were talking about it, but for anybody who cares, it's episode 2, Star Wars Clone Wars animated series, episode 3, then Rebels.
Okay.
So and then Solo, Rogue One, and then episode 4. But so I've been watching all of it. It's been super fun. I thought Ahsoka Tano was like a fine character from what I saw in like Mandalorian and what I heard about her. and also the first couple seasons, I thought she was fine. I know some people complain about her, but she's also supposed to be a like tween in the very beginning, so like those are all annoying. But yeah, now I see like how badass she is. I've been loving all of it. And I've gotten into Legends, the extended universe that's no longer officially canon. And I really want to play. I played a little bit of Old Republic Online, but I didn't really get into it. But I'm really excited to get everything moved, and then I'm gonna play the Old Republic. And and yeah, I've been fully into Star Wars
Yeah.
lately. It's been the thing that's been keeping me sane to any degree.
Well,
And
Shanae, as long as it makes you happy, right? Are you happy with
yeah,
your
and
Star
also
Wars?
yeah, yeah. I've always hated I mean I still think in the movies Anakin and Padme's relationship is garbage. Also, the animated their relationship is garbage. But I never understood why Padme would want to be with Anakin ever until recently, and I've read the novelizations of the first three movies. Uh, and it gives a lot more like insight into thought processes and stuff. And now I begrudgingly get why they're together. I still think Anakin's a little whiny baby, but I get it more now. So really, yeah, I've just been doing a lot of Star Wars, packing, moving, stressful stuff, uh, medication changes, and Fire Emblem. Or I think I said Fire Emblem first in Star Wars. I don't
Yeah.
know, but that's my brain's a little bit gone. But this week though, you you kind of mentioned it before. Yakuza, you said made you think about the normalization of men showing vulnerability in video games,
Yeah.
and I would love to talk about that.
Yeah. Uh, so, um, I would consider myself to be like, for the most part, I consider myself to be an emotionally intelligent person, and I think that has a lot to do with my upbringing, honestly. Um, because I think that like my mom has always been very she's always been very supportive of me showing my emotions and expressing myself in that way. And so like it has always felt normal to me to do that. But growing up, especially like when you're someone who loves action movies and video games, it's not something that you see in men a lot, right? And it's so it's not something that is presented as normal for the most part. Um, like we think like I think about the few examples that I've been able to come up with as far as like stuff in the action genre. Like I've made fun of it quite a lot over the last like decade and a half, only because like of how cheesy the scene is. But there's a scene in I think it's the first Gears of War game. It's either the first Gears of War game or the second. I can't remember. But there's a scene where one of the main characters, Dominic Santiago, is finally reunited with his wife. Um, and she's all fucked up, and she's you know she's not long for this world, right? And that scene, you know, Dom is distraught, and he's not quite I don't remember him like quite crying, but like he's very visibly
He's
upset.
distressed.
Yeah. And so like that scene is really corny for the most part, but like at the same time it does show something that we don't see a lot in video games, which is like men being emotionally vulnerable and showing like a real emotion that exists outside of anger. Because I think that we present a lot of time anger is presented to be a very manly, quote unquote, emotion, and that is the emotion that when a man shows it, it's not weird. It's just something that's accepted.
It's go time.
Yeah. So, um, and so in playing through the Yakuza games, uh, after finishing the fifth installment in that series, so one thing I noticed is that like there are themes in those games that are pretty persistent throughout, and so it seems like friendship and brotherhood and Um, but in exploring those themes, a lot of the time we will also see, people opening up emotionally. We'll see these characters opening up emotionally to each other, and a lot of the time, most of the time in that series, the person on screen doing the crying is a man, and again, that's not something we see often, right? A lot of times, like if we see someone crying on screen in a video game, it's a woman, and that's one of those things that people don't have a problem accepting because, like, we just that's a stereotype that we
Are emotional.
yeah, but that's a stereotype about women that we
Yeah.
perpetuate, because it's convenient, right? But so I'm not gonna say who it is, in case anybody here is on the is thinking of playing through the Yakuza games like I have, but in Yakuza 3, the main character, Kazuma Kiryu, he loses a really close friend, his friend gets shot, right? And his friend is lying there dying, and he's talking about, like, because Kiryu had this conversation with him previously about, like, what it means to be a man and what it means to kind of step up to the plate, and giving his life to save Kiryu, he, like, asked Kiryu, like, he's like said something along the lines like, do you think am I a real man now? Like, like, am I strong? Am I as strong as I should be at this point? And, like, it's a very emotional scene. And when Kiryu's friend breathes his last, like, you see for the first time in the series, like, Kiryu actually, that's the first time I've seen him cry in, like, the whole time. And it's like, it's not like, it doesn't feel like hammy at all. It's like a very realistic, like, very, like, it's a very honest portrayal of that kind of loss and what someone's immediate emotional reaction would be to that kind of loss. Because I think that in a lot of times, especially in action stuff, like when characters lose a friend in battle, like, the reaction is very stone faced, and it's just like,
Or it's just no.
yeah, it's something along the lines of like that, right? It's like it's never showing people being, like, open and emotional and, like, and crying in that way. And I remember earlier on in the series, Kiryu has this conversation with a friend of his who is going to betray him because for one reason or another. I mean, I know the reason, but I don't want to spoil it. But, like, in this conversation, like, they're like the friend that's going to betray him, like, honestly doesn't want to, and I lost you on video.
Oh, sorry. It's my Apple Watch is going crazy,
Oh.
and it affected and it pulled up the camera. Sorry.
That's okay. But, like, it's one of those scenes where it's like, hey, like Kiryu is making it very hard for him to go through this betrayal. And this conversation, like, there's these two people who are, like, being open and honest and real with each other, and like these emotions are being laid out in the open, right? And they're talking honestly and frankly about what they're feeling and what they're going through. And I noticed, like, and thinking about this and other examples in the Yakuza series, I also think about, like, this seems like something that I've grown accustomed to specifically in Japanese video games. Because I think about Metal Gear Solid, and there's a character named Otacon, who Otacon is present in the first 4 games of the series, right? And he's present in 3 of the first 4 games, and in every game, he cries, like, a lot, and I try to think about, like, and it's always like something, like, it has something to do with him being in love, or it always has something to do with him losing someone that he loves, right? And it always has something to do with like dealing with loss in that way. And again, like I said a moment ago, like when a male character on screen like deals with loss, it's like the example you pointed out. Like, it was like no, right? But
Is it, and then correct me if I'm wrong, because I have listened to a podcast trying to explain the Metal Gear series story,
yeah,
but um, isn't there like a female? This is before Snake becomes the big boss. There's like a female leader. It's like a
oh,
predestined that he takes her down,
it's the boss,
and
yeah,
like he has to kill her, and it isn't like a bittersweet thing. Like it's not like something like you're supposed to feel like accomplished about. It's something that
yeah,
had to be done.
yeah, yeah. So and it's like and that's and these are and like that's something that like and again that's something that shows itself in Yakuza as well, is just like the idea of like I don't want to, like I can fight and I am capable of fighting and I am willing to go through this fight because it is the only means to this end that I'm trying to achieve, but it's not something that I actively want to do, and after it's done I'm not going to feel good about it, right? And that's something that, that's
But
that.
even then, does Snake cry or react when he has to do it, or is it another like thing where he's like pretty solemn about it,
So
but
I
it's not showing?
and that's the thing about
But I mean, like I don't think Snake is like a really emotional person. So like whether he was male or female, like a Furiosa kind
yeah,
of character,
yeah.
I think he would probably have the same reaction. And that one, it makes more sense with his characterization if it's my understanding of how that storyline went down.
Yeah. Well, like I think that like it's weird, right? Because I think that Snake has always shown a capability of understanding like excuse me, different nuances of like human emotion and like understanding how people could be conflicted in the ways that they are. But at the same time, and like if you ever watch like cutscenes from a Metal Gear game, like he will speak at length about how much he understands these things. But at the same time, it's not often that you see him so affected that he will cry about anything. And like if there's ever a moment, I think, when, and I keep in mind that like a lot of and in this conversation I'm talking about Solid Snake and Big Boss interchangeably because I feel like they're kind of presented similarly in all the games that they appear in. But like, for example, in Metal Gear Solid 3, when Big Boss has to kill the boss, that relationship is important to him, right? Like he didn't want to fight this person. He didn't he was hoping like it wouldn't come to this, right? But like it did. And there's obviously an emotion that goes there where like you have to physically fight someone that you look up to and respect and probably even love. And I think that his reaction to that stuff is probably not typical to the way a person normally would act. Because I think that like I think that if like you ever were forced to fight your best friend, like not argue with your best, but like physically fight your best friend, I think that would really really fuck you up emotionally, right? And
Yeah,
and he does.
I would just let you kill me.
Well, he and like the story does talk about like how screwed over he felt after the fact by the U.S. government and like which led him down the path that he eventually set out on later on. But like,
Yeah.
I think that Snake, like both Big Boss and Solid Snake as characters have never really shown themselves to be like outwardly emotional characters, and I think that goes along with the archetype that the character archetype that they fill. And it seems that like it has always been the default to kind of just like relegate that stuff to like characters around Snake as opposed to Snake himself.
Yeah.
But
So I Yeah, whenever you brought up this topic, I was thinking about times I've seen vulnerability in male characters in video games, and especially them being like a pretty like emotionally intense thing. So one of the first things that like popped in my mind was a couple moments like like Last of Us, uh, uh, being one of the things that pops up, and things similar to like Gears of War, like Dawn with Maria and stuff. And how many of those games, when they do show emotion, it's because of a daughter or a wife.
Yeah.
How it's okay if a female is involved,
Yeah.
or that it's okay to be like emotional. And that's also got me thinking of like, well, what's because I don't know Yakuza, so I didn't know what context you're doing it through, and I didn't realize it was a friend. And that's something I also see more in like Japanese games and stuff like that. Because in Western society, even though like we've progressed it a lot, like there still is that thing where there's a line with men. If you're emotionally vulnerable with your male friends, it it means that you're gay.
Right.
And so people like shy away from it because it means something about their sexuality or them as a person.
Right.
And like there's like any talk to anybody who's ever worked with like a suicide hotline, men don't normally talk about their mental health with each other.
Right.
They will talk about times they couldn't get it up, the shit they took,
Yeah.
like all those things, but not like what you're mentally struggling with or showing like real emotions to each other unless it's a giant event that makes it okay. Like someone passing,
Yeah.
having a kid. Like it has to be a giant, like, okay event that's been made. And I try to really think about characters in games that are men that show emotion where a woman is not involved. Like it's either a friendship or whatever. And a lot of those, I feel like with Western society, they tend to be to make them then kids,
Yeah.
like boys or like teens, because it's okay if they show emotion because they're not adults yet. They haven't learned to handle it yet, so they can be emotional and it's more okay.
Yeah.
And and I never really thought. I mean, I've definitely thought about like things that aren't equal to society, like parental leave or whatever. But I never really thought about until you brought it up, like the emotional vulnerability of men. And also one of the things that popped in my head was Halo. But then I remembered he's taken as a child,
Yeah.
like Master Chief is, to like, and I think he's like trained to not have emotions or they're cut out or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really super far into the Halo franchise. But like, and then also then it came up to wondering some of these older games when I think about them. I mean, Halo. I mean, Yakuza 3. I don't know when that came out, but it's
Uh,
honestly not as recent, super
08.
recent.
Yeah, it came out in like 2008.
I think maybe some of the system limitations as well, like portraying that character. But then, like when we think about like 8-bit games and stuff like that, like a lot of those when like you have like a male character crying or like showing a lot of emotion, because crying isn't the only way to be emotionally vulnerable,
Right.
but like a lot of those characters were like joke characters,
Right. Yeah.
where this is the guy who's super lovey-feely, this is the guy that's cryy, like you said that with the
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid, there's the one character that cries every game,
Yeah.
where it becomes like a joke or a relegated to a side character. But when I think about like there's a lot of point and click adventure games or story games where there is like emotions shown, Atome games that have been around forever, like it has to be a cultural thing and not just system limitations.
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely what it is too. And like you mentioned Halo, which is I think a really good example because there's a point in the Halo franchise where early on, I think early on in the Halo franchise, it's established that like the close relationship between Cortana and Master Chief, right? And they're like I would say for all intents and purposes, Cortana is Master Chief's only friend, and
Yeah, she really is. Like everything I know about Halo, she basically is. And he's been like subjected to all these tests and
yeah,
all these experiments, and to a point where the only person he can relate to is a computer.
yeah, yeah. Well, like
And that's indicative of how emotionless he is.
see, here's the thing, right? Is that so I've played Halos 1 through 4. So I don't know. I played Halos. Of all the games with Master Chief in them, I've played 4 of them. I played the first 4 of them, and in Halo 4, it's to the point where, like, basically Cortana's life is in danger, and there's a sense of urgency with that, right? Like it's a very time is of the essence sort of thing, right? And but like it's weird because like there's a disconnect for me a little bit because like Master Chief and every like he delivers his lines with the same no matter what he's saying, it's all with the same exact inflection. And so like you know that Cortana is important to Chief because if you're someone who has like played the first 3 games before it, like you've been through all these adventures with Chief and Cortana, so you understand the importance of that relationship to him, right? Or at least what is implied to be. But
at least the presence, yeah.
Yeah, and so like I do get that like panic has never resolved a situation for anybody, but at the same time, like I think that like my friend's life is in danger. Like there's a sense of like I have an emotional reaction to it, right? Like as like what can I do to fix this? Like how do I fix this, right? And I'm going to feel like I'm elevated in some way, and I think that because of how he's I think because of how Master Chief is portrayed, I think getting that emotion through, like getting the emotion of that sort of thing through, is completely reliant on Cortana, right? Like if she doesn't show that emotion, then like it doesn't come through, right? Because you can't rely on Master Chief, right? So all of her
He has emotions.
yeah, like all of her like
I think he's like programmed not to. I don't know if they like snipped him out or what.
Yeah, well, like it's apparent that he is capable of forming connections, right? And but like again, but like even though like you understand that he is capable of forming those connections, but like outwardly he doesn't. And like and that's another thing too. Like he can't emote with his face because you like for all intents and purposes that character doesn't have a face, right? So
yeah, that helmet got no emotions.
Yeah, so like you have to rely on Cortana to carry you through all the emotion of those interactions, and like when it gets to the point where like, well, something bad might happen to Cortana, like the seriousness of that and the gravity of that has to be carried by Cortana, and like the way that her lines are delivered, because Master Chief is going to be like, okay, we have to go do that thing and shoot those guys so that doesn't happen, and like. And that's the extent that you can expect from him. But like again, that is the character though. Like he's the stone cold badass all the time. So, you know, like him getting emotional is antithetical to that archetype. So,
like I said, I'm not even sure if he has emotions because I think that might have been snipped out. And they have to show a lot of his emotions with the background music as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason that people do remember the like music and sounds of Halo so much, because that character is not going to give you anything,
right?
Like,
yeah, and I think people would make the argument that like people don't go to Halo for that, but I honestly think that if stories are worth writing and if characters are worth establishing, then it is worth exploring who they are as people. Because they have to be more than what we see, right? They can't just be that.
Because then that's when you get a Duke Nukem's.
Yeah. Which it would be fascinating to see if to watch Duke Nukem try to navigate any sort of emotional growth. Which like and it's very that's a funny thing.
That game.
The funny thing about Duke Nukem is, as you get older, well, I can only really speak for myself, but as I've gotten older and learned more about like people in general, it becomes very apparent that this is some kind of coping mechanism for him.
Yeah. Like it's 100% like he is insecure and covering this up. Like this is his mask. This is his Master Chief helmet that he's wearing to cover himself. But even when I think about like the videos I've seen of the gameplay of, because I watched the Castlevania series on Netflix, so I was like, what's the games like? And I've like looked them up and watched like YouTube videos and stuff. Whenever like Alucard is with like Dracula and stuff, and you see the lines, like obviously, and like they're just written, so they don't have like the voice actors in some of them. You can't really get that through, and like that, do think is some like system limitations. Like you can't get like because your character, your sprite can't
Yeah.
like move a lot, or it can't like the face can't change a lot. And then I also was thinking about the in Final Fantasy VII with when Aerith dies
Yeah.
and everybody like mourns her. At that point, you could show more expression in there.
Yeah.
But yet again, in my mind, I was like, yet again, a female has to die
Yeah. And I like
to
I
get that
a
to
a
happen.
lot of that time when we're and yeah, I think that and getting a man to open up in a video game, a lot of the time, violence against a woman in some ways used as the plot device for that. Um, and it's a very weird fixation, I think, with using violence against women as a plot device, right? Like it
Even Left 4 Dead does, or not Left 4 Dead, Last of Us
yeah,
does because his daughter dies,
yeah.
and so
And
he's Ellie is like a surrogate daughter.
yeah, and well, yes, you can make the argument that like events would have proceeded as they would, regardless of whether or not his daughter died. But the fact that,
But it wouldn't have been emotionally compelling.
yeah,
It wouldn't have.
like
He wouldn't have been the same person.
yeah, that changes the character at that point, right? Um, and so I think that like one of the things I do think that Yakuza falls into the trap of like violence against a woman being like a motivation at some point. But it is so often though that it is some sort of like the motivation is a relationship between two men and how it has either evolved or devolved, right? And so a lot of the time, like when you'll see Kiryu like doing the things that he does, it's usually because like, okay, well this brother of mine is in some kind of trouble and I have to help him, or this brother of mine is going down this really dark path and I have to stop him. And either way, the emotional depth is there. And like I said, I think that Yakuza, like as a franchise, is for the most part, like if you ever play any of those games, you will immediately see how like cartoony and over the top a lot of the presentation of those games is. But at the same time, it has a very realistic portrayal of the range of human emotion, because I think that a lot of the times when we talk about emotion in video games, especially when it comes to men, it's a very binary thing, right? I'm either angry with you or I'm not angry with you. I either hate you or I don't, right? Whereas I think that when it comes to Yakuza, like there's more gradients to that, right? It's like, yeah, there's like I don't like yes, I am angry with you in this moment, but we also have a past, right? We also have like we grew up together, or we've fought side by side for a really long time, and I can't just hate you, right? And there are times where like Kiryu has had to put dudes in the ground, but but afterwards he's always like afterwards he's
fire some slugs.
Afterwards he's always just like, you know what, like he was really because one of the people that ultimately dies is his childhood best friend, who like ended up like just being corrupted by power, and then like Kiryu like eventually had to do something about that. And like in later games he'll like go to that person's grave and be like, you know what, you're a really good person and you did bad things, but like I know that you were a good person, and I'm always going to remember you for like all the memories that we have together. And so there is nuance there, right? Because like you don't just like, I think that the way that you feel about people isn't a switch that you just flip, right? Like if you, because I think, and I do think
most people, I know quite a few people who are very black and white
yeah
people. It's either I'm okay with you or I'm not, and once they've decided on one, that's just it.
Yeah.
Until someone does something drastic to change that. But that's not how most people operate. Most people, it's all of it is an accumulation of your experience and your emotions at that time,
right,
and also the action that was done. And but that kind of, you're gonna hate me for saying this, but it kind of reminds me of the relationship between Sora and Riku in Kingdom Hearts, because Riku is like at certain points he is the like antagonist to an extent, but they competed against each other. But he loved him no
Yeah.
matter what. Like, and that's something that also resonated with me with the games and why I love them, because I'm a know-it-all now, but I used to be way more obnoxious as a kid, and I would compete with everybody on everything. I hated losing. I I don't like that past side of myself, which is part of the reason I'm not competitive now, and I don't like being in competitive spaces because I know I can get caught up, and I don't like the person it makes me.
Yeah.
And but like growing up and real and like seeing that you can be competitive with somebody and still love them,
Yeah.
I think was a really nice thing to see. But also, yet again, to a past point, showing emotions in this way done by a child.
Yeah. And so like, I think one of the time, I think what really got me thinking about this a lot was, I think like, maybe shit, like I guess it'd be about 3 years ago now. I was talking about Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus, and it was the first, and like first of all, I never in a million years thought that someone would make it so that the main character of Wolfenstein, BJ Blazkowicz, would be someone that I gave a shit about. Like, he was always just the guy with the gun to me for like the longest time. He was the guy with the gun, right? But I think a lot of
The guys in Contra. Do I give a shit who they are? Do I even remember their names? I don't. I just they're the guys. They're the guys with the guns.
Yeah.
Even though we both love River City Ransom, there's not really a lot of difference between the two main characters.
Yeah. And so like, I think it was, so when it got around to, so when Machine Games started making the Wolfenstein games, which it started with Wolfenstein The New Order, and it was the first time that like BJ had actually been like, he actually had like character, right? He actually had a personality, and like he was actually like someone that you could like give a shit about, right? Because he has things about him that are relatable. But I think that like in New Colossus is when he really kind of really opened up as far as like the idea of this tough as nails, like very capable and just overall badass character who was also dealing with grief in a way that I think a lot of people I've known in my life have dealt with grief. And in the beginning of New Colossus, BJ loses like a very dear friend of his, and which, surprise, surprise, is a woman. But
At least it's a friend and not
yeah,
wife or daughter.
yeah, yeah. So his like,
I mean, at least normalizing opposite gendered friendships.
which I honestly think that this whole violence against women as a plot device is going to be another conversation, because there's like plenty of material for that. But
yeah.
But like, so he loses this friend, right? Her name is Caroline, and
Oh God, I want to sing "Sweet Caroline" so bad right now.
but like, here's the thing: is that like he loses her, and as someone with a lot of family from the South, like BJ is also presented as someone because BJ grew up in Texas, and he's
Yeehaw.
and like the way people in the South, I feel, deal with grief a lot is they usually turn to a higher power, or at the very least they speak to the person that they lost as if that person can hear them and is watching over them, right? And
yeah.
So immediately through most of the game, I'd say at least through the first half of the game, after this friend dies, he ends up using like she has this suit of powered armor that she used to like fight and also to walk, because her legs didn't work. But he's falling apart himself, so he used that armor to fight back against the Nazis. And like as he's wearing the armor, he just talks to her like all the time. Like he says like when he first puts on the armor, he says something like he's like, "Carolyn, I hope you don't mind if I borrow your wings for a little bit," and which like almost made me fucking cry when I first heard it.
I was like, oh.
And like
that
and like
Oh,
and then
that's been hard.
and then like but as he's fighting, he's like, I've like he talks about like he's like, I hope I'm doing you proud, and I hope, I hope that I wouldn't like, and like he keeps talking to her, right? But there's a part in the game later on where BJ runs into his dad. And early on, like the very beginning, like the his father is portrayed as an abusive, anti-Semitic bigot, who and BJ is half Jewish, right? His mother is Jewish, and he talks about how he only married her because his father talks about how he only married her because like her dad was rich and he just wanted money and land and stuff like that, right? And so when BJ runs into him again as an adult, he goes to their childhood home, and his dad talks about how like he's like, yeah, I gave your mother up to the Nazis because they promised me immunity and they promised me I'd have power. And then BJ's like, he doesn't immediately lash out, like he just like, you look at his face and he's just fucking heartbroken. And like his dad is like, you know what? I told them that you were coming. I told them I knew you're here, and I told them that you're here, and they're gonna come get you. And then like BJ, like he doesn't lash out at his dad. He just looks at him and he's like, Daddy, I'm your son. And then I was just like, holy shit.
My heart.
And he's like, the way that he says it, it's just like he is so dejected, and like this is just so heavy, and like because like you look at it and it subverts so many expectations, right? Because the expectation that you see, especially like with everything that BJ has done up to that point, it's like, well, he's just gonna rip this dude's head off. But like, no, he's just like, that's his dad, and like he's like, even after all that, he's just like, I can't believe my dad would do this. And like to see that kind of like depth of emotion with a character like that is it's just like amazing. And at that point, BJ is like apprehended by the Nazis because they want to execute him, and
I'm listening.
they want to execute him. And they're gonna make a whole public spectacle out of it, right? And like the whole thing is that like BJ is starting to realize that he may be at the end of his life, and he sees he has this dream where he sees his mom again, and it feels like he goes like, it's not a dream really, it's more like a hallucination, because he goes in, because like he as he's about to be executed, he has this hallucination that he meets his mom in this office in the building that he's in, and he sees her sitting in this chair, and he just like, he talks to her about his wife, and he's like, I have twin daughters on the way. He's like, I want you to meet them so bad. And like he just lays his head in her lap, and he just tells her that he loves her. And like, that is just not something that you would ever in a million years expect to see in a first person shooter, where you spend most of it running at 90 miles an hour, like chopping Nazis heads off, right? That's what you don't see. And so it just, and like and the whole game is just like emotional gut punches like that. And like,
in between killing Nazis.
Yeah, because like he even like the first girl, I shouldn't say woman, the first girl that BJ ever loved was this little black girl named Billy. And keep in mind that BJ grew up in the like 1930s Texas. And
yeah, that wasn't looking on well, even if you were half Jewish.
Yeah, so he grew up in 1930s Texas, and so like that, like their friendship was mostly like, it wasn't like a secret, because honestly, and I've said it before, like racism is a learned behavior. It's not an innate behavior. So like his dad was racist, right? But like he wasn't, like BJ was like, this is his friend. So like he's like, I don't have any reason to hate you. But like, naturally BJ's dad was just like really against it, and he actually used the N-word in reference to her. But he just had this real like connection with this person, like honestly his first real friend. And when he goes back to his childhood home, and you have all these flashbacks with these different objects, and you see him, like when he doesn't know where Billy is because he hasn't seen Billy since he was a kid. But like he talks to Billy like in a very like in the same way that you talk to someone who isn't there, and he's like he's like Billy, I don't know where you are, but I hope you're okay. And it is very like refreshing, honestly, to see characters who are allowed to feel that way. And I feel like in that way, I'm empowered in my own circles a lot of the times when speaking about things like this to open myself up in that way. Because I think even at 36 years old, it's still sometimes something that I struggle with is being outwardly and openly emotional around other men because that's just something that
Well, that's not how boys are taught to
yeah
socialize.
yeah
And that's part of the reason why, like I said, with like if you talk to anyone with the suicide hotlines, like they're not taught to speak with their friends, especially male friends, in an open and emotional manner. Like
right
they're not taught like girls are taught to hash it out and like sometimes it's with like petty means or whatever. Look at any teen movie;
yeah
it'll tell you like they are terrible representations, but they perpetuate the biggest of stereotypes.
yeah yeah
Uh, and yeah, like that's being talked about more now than ever. And one of the other things also culturally and especially after, and this is, maybe just speaking for, I mean, all of this obviously is anecdotal, but, especially after the Iraq War and so many of our troops came back with PTSD, and even though our mental health system in the US is still fucking terrible,
yeah
it's it's more knowledge than it was with Vietnam or even the Gulf War or any of the world wars about the effects of it and like with PTSD. And I'm seeing more war games like talk about it. Like I believe it's Spec Ops: The Line.
yes
That he thinks that he's getting commands from this guy the entire time, and
yeah
then like by the way, spoilers for anyone that's going to play Spec Ops: The Line, if I'm right about the game.
yeah
uh, he thinks he's getting commands from this like old friend, but then he realizes that and he goes and finds that friend dead, and he realizes that everything he's done
yeah
is dissonance from PTSD.
yeah
You're seeing it talked about more in games, and like when you see like old soldiers or whatever, they have PTSD, and it's one of the few things that I could think about where it wasn't about a woman, their child, or like vengeance
yeah
is was showing men in a vulnerable emotional state is PTSD.
right
That's also it's now culturally okay to show that, and I think that's good because there are so many people who deal with PTSD. Granted, it also still stereotypes that the PTSD can only be thought about wartime. That's an entirely different conversation.
yeah
But I'm glad that there's like it that people are creating storylines around it that are interesting and compelling. Because I've heard people speak well of the Spec Ops: The Line plenty of times, and yeah, like with doing all these different games and like or movies or shows or any sort of media that people consume, having it be in there, even if it's not the main focal point, does normalize it.
yeah
And I mean, of course, that game, I don't want to say like glorifies it, but it definitely like is a very big dramatic
sure as a,
dramatization of it because most people with PTSD are not going to go on this giant adventures thinking that
yeah
their friend is telling them to do this and
yeah
finding out it's all them.
well I think that the exploration of any kind of mental illness in video games is important, especially like but it all comes down to like how it's presented, right? Because I think one of the major pitfalls that video games are falling into and like for a while is kind of gamifying mental illness a lot, like with games like Eternal Darkness. Like I think that like I think the way that game tries to that game makes mental illness a game mechanic in a way that like I think is like really hard to take seriously. But then I also think about like I think about Darkest Dungeon too, right? Where I think about like how
And
I think about how like one of the things that I'm not going to say that Darkest Dungeon is the best portrayal of mental illness, because honestly it isn't, but I will say that it is one of the few times when the stress of doing like that kind of thing is actually represented in a video game. Because I think a lot of the time when we're talking about video game characters and the ways that they the challenges that they navigate, like we don't really talk about like what kind of effect these things have on them, right? And so I think that Darkest Dungeon is one of the few games that I played where like that's actually explored.
because once you hit, for those who haven't played it, once you've hit a certain level in your stress meter, and that's done through like battles or going through the dungeon or
Yeah.
your torch going low. But the stress, once you're in stress is in or insanity meter has hit a certain level, either a negative effect happens or a positive one.
Yeah.
And so like some people's breaking points do get them out of terrible situations. Like the whole thing where like sometimes you have to hit rock bottom so you can dig yourself out because you
Yeah.
need that like that level. And it's true. Some people do at certain points with certain things, like they are the type of person that has to hit that point to get better.
Yeah.
And not that Darkest Dungeon is that nuanced with it.
Yeah.
But
And I do
also
definitely think I do
dealing with Eldritch terror.
Yeah, and I do think that like that Darkest Dungeon's portrayal of mental illness is also problematic. And I think that the only game that I've actually played that actually done it with any sort of like real respect and reverence is Hellblade. But
I mean, there's games about depression and stuff.
Yeah.
But
really, like it's.
I was gonna bring up another game too with the PTSD thing, but I can't think of it now. I made a point. It doesn't matter.
Well, it's so funny, right? Because like when we go back to talking about like men being openly emotional and like showing anything outside of anger, because again, anger can be justified by anything because anger is the manly emotion, right? So we don't need something crazy to justify that, right? But I think that when it comes to like sadness or fear or loneliness or anything in between, like he always needs something that like really pushes him to that point, like my kid's got to die or something crazy like that has to happen, right? And it's never like it's never just I just feel that way right now. Right? It's never just I just feel sad right now, right?
And some of that you get in like sim games, but you're so detached from the game, like The Sims or other simulator games,
Yeah.
like that where it's like Second Life or whatever. You're so detached from that character that or even like the people who like even like World of Warcraft characters and stuff like that. There's some that are just like depressed and lonely, like NPCs that you find.
Yeah.
You're not really that character. It does show it, but you see so many characters, you see so many people that it's just a wash in the sea.
Yeah.
And I guess like in some points that's definitely like some like representation and normalization of like people having different emotions and it being okay for them to be like that. But I it's not like a focal point. And with some games, and of course games have at some capacity, most of them, especially like action adventure games or first person shooters, like you have to have like some sort of compelling storyline.
Right.
And somebody just doing something and then just throwing in there that like he feels like lonely throughout all this, it doesn't necessarily fit and feels like it feel like it's ham-fisted. And so if that's the reason why your game doesn't have it, I guess it's understandable. But more and more games having things like Yakuza where it's showing male friendship and even like showing different storylines like The Last of Us, even though like it has to have this cataclysm, it does show different forms of masculinity.
Right.
And being vulnerable with it, wanting to be a good father, imagining that life of being a good husband as well, and having that not hit your expectations and dealing with everything that's going on as well as the loss of that. is compelling.
Yeah.
And same thing if you were a woman who lost your kids or husband, not that that story happens as often. But two of the games I wanted to bring up though was like Heavy Rain, I think, and I think was very interesting to show a lot of different facets of male emotions. Granted, it's a lot, and there's definitely some really campy, over the top things and things that are just funny about the game. And of course, it's like I think Life is Strange is also touted as being very compelling. I don't really know the story of that, but as far as oh my god, my brain just broke for a second. What was the thing about before Life is Strange?
Heavy Rain.
Yeah, Heavy Rain. So like with because you've played it before, right?
Nope.
All right. Well,
I don't
like,
play David Cage games.
well, I played it when it came out, but and I haven't. So in there, you're playing different viewpoints and
Right.
different people, and like as the games go on, you see how they're all interconnected. And with it, like you see two brothers, and one brother is like falls in this like hole and like this drainage, and is like trying to hold on,
Yeah.
and like it's the older brother, and he's like, and the younger one's trying to like get him out, and like he can't, and he goes to his dad, and his dad's so drunk that he doesn't give a shit, nor does he believe him, and like that spawns basically a killer, and like you see those things that like you see traumas of men that cause them to do certain actions,
Yeah.
but very rarely do they explore the man feeling it and how he thinks about it. Like when you tell me about the BJ Blazkowicz, like Daddy, I'm your son, like you don't really see a lot of that. You just see that like trauma happened, and so now they are this person.
Well, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's really, and I think that's really, and I think that that's really touching. Like makes my heart hurt hearing even you just talk about it.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to ask you because, and I'm glad that because you mentioned Red Dead Redemption before,
Yeah.
and some of the things that people absolutely love, some people do love the story of it,
I love that
and
story.
I want
It's a great game.
and and you said that as well, and I wanted to know. So, what is like John Marston like? Is he also? Because I know he has like a son and
Yeah.
family in
Yeah.
it.
He has. I don't remember his wife's name, but his son's name is Jack. Jack. And so here's the thing about John Marston, right? Is that like, okay, so in Red Dead Redemption 2, like it's the younger John Marston, right? And he's very much like, so that game is, and again, in Red Dead Redemption 2, John Marston is a secondary character, right? He's a side character that you interact with, but he's very much he's a very irresponsible, like young guy. He does have like these moments where he shows you like how loyal he is to people, especially when it comes to matters of his wife and son. And like and I think that like I think early on he was very irresponsible toward his son, but like there's a later in the game, later in Red Dead Redemption 2 and in the epilogue, he shows himself to be like a much more, he makes a stronger effort to be a better father and husband. But like I think that a lot of the emotional range in Red Dead Redemption 2 comes from Arthur, for the most part.
Uh,
Well, like, and that's another thing too, right? Because I think Red Dead Redemption 2 is a very, because I think that honestly, the first Red Dead Redemption game is like more about like, I'm just trying to get out. I'm trying to get out of this life, and I'm trying to have peace for me and my family, and so
I gotta rob these stations,
yeah,
and then I got things to do.
I have shit that I have to do. But like at Red Dead Redemption 2, though, it is a much longer game, so it also, but a a benefit of that is it gives you more time to explore the relationships between Arthur and the people around him, right? But the most important one, I think, that is discussed throughout the game, the relationship between him and Dutch, right? Because the relationship between him and Dutch is that of a kind of an adoptive father and son, and there is a lot of conflict that comes with that when you start seeing someone that you've looked up to for the last 20 years of your life, and they start doing stuff that's kind of suspect, and as things go,
Real sus.
and as time goes on, like he starts being more weird and more violent, and so you watch Arthur kind of try to navigate that, right?
Come to terms.
Well, yeah, because he's like, okay, well, this shit is wrong, and I'm trying to also balance that with my loyalty to Dutch, right? And so watching him go through that and hearing him talk, and there's this moment, and spoiler alert for anybody who is actively playing Red Dead Redemption 2, but there's this moment where Dutch and Arthur and a few of the others in the gang end up on this island because they get shipwrecked, right? And there is a point.
Wait, are they in the Wild West? How are they shipped? No, fine.
So there's this.
Not the point. Sorry, keep going. Keep going.
There's a thing. They end up having to get on a boat because Dutch has this plan to get on this boat, and like because that's the thing about Dutch. He always has some kind of plan, right? And I forget why exactly they're stowing away on this boat, but they do. Then the storm hits, and then they end up on an island. Anyway, so like the island is inhabited by a bunch of people, and one such person is this woman who seems to know her way around the island, and she like knows all these secret passages, and she's like, hey, like I'll like pay me and I'll tell you to secret passages and help you out to help you escape. And like that lady helps them like a lot, and then Dutch like kind of just like hauls off and like strangles her to death, and he's just like
as you want to do.
Yeah, and he was like, and Dutch justifies it was like, well, she knows all our plans and we can't have her going off and telling everybody about our plans. And then like Arthur looks at him, and that's the moment I think where Arthur's trust in Dutch broke, because he just looks at Dutch. He's like, you gonna strangle me too, Dutch? And at that moment, like that's when you know that their relationship is like never, like they've passed the point of no return at that point. But again, it's one of those times where you get to watch the relationship between two men devolve, and it's not something that happened, like it's not like a light switch is flipped and they're at each other's throats. It's like
he betrayed us. We must kill him.
Yeah, and this is something that like it's a betrayal that's like gnawing in the back of Arthur's mind, right? Because he knows that Dutch isn't all there, but he's like, but this guy's like my dad, right? So like
Dutch.
Yeah, like so like I love this guy, and like I don't want to believe that he's becoming who I think he's becoming, but like it's really looking like he is. And like so like, but again, like it's one of those times where like you could imagine in any other kind of video game where that would happen, and then it's just a fight right then, right? It's just like then they're just fighting. And for the longest time, that's how we've known men in video games to kind of express themselves emotionally, is by yelling and hitting each other, right? And so it's nice to see that like that's not always the path that we go down, right? That's not always the end result, and it's important to kind of explore the idea that, and I'm not by any means trying to come off as like saying like men have the worst representation of video games ever, because let me tell you something, that's women. women have it a lot rougher, but like I think that like
women of color specifically.
Yeah. But I think that it's important to normalize these things, because I think that also, again, we don't talk about these things, right? We don't talk about how men are feeling a lot of time, and it causes a lot of problems like in real life. Like that's like a lot of men kill themselves because they can't talk about, they're not able to talk about how they feel. So
and talking about one poor representation or wanting to see more of something in games does not at all detract from other problems that exist or wanting to see more of other things as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that with these conversations, that when people bring whataboutisms, and like it's some competition for what's the most egregious problem in video games.
Yeah.
And not that this is even just the most egregious problem in video games. I mean, it's like we said, it's culturally.
Yeah.
And seeing this more and more, and having even those small instances for the last like couple decades of seeing more vulnerable men, it's nothing but positives. It's one of the few good things I can say about it is it's movies, but the Fantastic Beasts series and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them series. One of the main things that I did really enjoy about it is Newt Scamander is he's kind of like he shows a different form of masculinity. Like it's kind of hinted at in a lot of the fandom that he's autistic, but none of it is he really like braggy or showy. And having these small instances in every media type, it gives people more to relate to, that they like how they are is not wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important for people to feel like there's not, that they're not broken or that there's something wrong. Because again, I grew up in a household where showing emotion is a very normal and regular thing. Like I was always told to do that. But I think that a lot of the time, like, you know, I grew up a lot of time getting made fun of for it. Right. And and to this day, like it's something that I still kind of contend with. But I think it's important to normalize that stuff so that people know that they're like, there's nothing wrong with being sad. There's nothing wrong with crying or talking about how you feel. It's normal shit.
And yeah, and being emotional and vulnerable has nothing to do with your masculinity. And I think, and I can't speak for other girls, but I mean, for sure, especially growing up in the time that I did, I went through a big phase of like, well, I'm not like other girls.
Oh yeah, did you get picked, sis?
But like, you know, seeing all these examples of what people think is cool,
Yeah.
what the cool personality is in video games, because I played a lot of them, is like that stoic character, or that character who's like super smarmy and smartassy.
Yeah.
And that's what's okay. That's who I want to emulate, even as a woman, and like playing these games, is because that's what I think people want.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of nuances in personalities. And yeah, like I don't know. I think it's having these discussions and having more normalization of these things across the board, whether and I don't mean this to demean any conversation, but even like games like KOTOR and having like alien species that may not have a gender, having some of them have more nuanced storylines, that emotions and experiences have a vast array and exist. It's just nothing but beneficial in my mind.
Yeah. So, and I think honestly, like, I do think that we need to kind of inject more of that into the action game genre, because I think that's where it's needed the most, honestly. And don't get me wrong, I don't want people to shoehorn like heavily emotional plots into their game just to have them, but I do think that like there are story beats in a lot of these action games where an emotional response is appropriate, right? And I think that a lot of times these things are overlooked for one reason or another, but if we can normalize male characters who show like a different side of themselves and show themselves to be like human beings, really
multifaceted.
Yeah, because I think that emotion is a huge spectrum, right? And there's a lot of gradients from one extreme to another. And I think that also like the feelings that you have toward other people are very nonlinear. And so if we can find more games that can explore that and find more realistic ways to portray that and believable and relatable ways to portray that, then I think it'll feel more normal to people who play these video games, and by extension improve their lives in the way that, you know, hey, look, I'm not afraid to talk about how I feel because like this badass guy here, he did it, and so like it should be okay for me to do it. And I don't think that it should have to come to that, but I do think that we do turn to media for how we should carry ourselves a lot of the time. And I think that if it's a media, like if video games are a media that you heavily ingest, then you should definitely be able to see that sort of thing in that media. And so like, and I think that one thing that like you and I have both have a lot of experience with is Persona 5, right? And I think that specifically with the kids in that game, and with both Ryuji and Yusuke, they're both very emotional people. Like Ryuji has like more
the Joker isn't.
Yeah, but like Joker's more like of a blank slate. And so but like but with Ryuji, like he deals a lot with anger, but like there are times where like where like early on in the game where like you're going out to eat ramen with Ryuji, and he talks about like if you say something to him that kind of validates his emotions or validates how he's feeling or thinking, and he's like, man, no one's ever made me feel like that. And it's like, oh
my gosh.
Well, like specifically he says, you're the only guy that's ever made me feel like that. And that's important. And like people don't like people never talk about that, but like it's so important that like Ryuji, like he was able to talk about his feelings with this guy and like feel validated,
And yes, so, and I hate how much Mona shits on Ryuji.
Yeah.
I really, really do. But like, I think it's one of the things, again, what we talked about, where emotions are relegated to side characters.
Yeah.
Granted, Persona 5 is more nuanced than other games I could think of, with the fact that it has those interactions. And then with Yusuke, it's super antagonistic on that friendship. It's very much Yusuke being very condescending, and also a bit of a creep to Anne.
Yeah.
But slowly growing as a person and showing that, and that's what a lot of that game is about. You don't really like when they keep mentioning in that game, if you've never played it, rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And in there, and what that means, and since the Joker is such a blank slate, and even the options that you can pick on for conversations on how to answer,
yeah,
they're all
like largely indifferent.
Yeah, none of them are an opinion or a personality.
Yeah.
But as you go through the game, you see the growth in the people around you.
Yeah.
It's showing, and I think that's one of the things that I like, that I think is done well when you have a blank slate character, is because like obviously you want that so you can hit the biggest demographic.
Yeah.
And you want people to be, it's the same thing with like young adult fiction and teen shows, like where like people complain like Twilight, like the main character has no personality. It's so the person can inject themselves in that way.
Right.
But like you see the growth in the people around you and how your character has instigated that growth and those things, and that works so well with the Persona series. And I think that's a time where a blank slate character can be so beneficial, because you can inject all your own things in there, but still affect people, because out of the grand scheme and a lot of things, like your emotions don't necessarily dictate those around you, but your actions do.
Yeah.
You can be lonely, you can be mad at the situation that you're forced into, but if you're putting in those steps to benefit those around you and connect with them and try to connect, like it's nice.
Yeah. And like one last thing I'm gonna say about how men's emotional state is represented in video games versus women. So this is something that I've said many times in conversation that typically doesn't go over very well, but it is something that I truly honestly believe. So look at Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, right? And Cloud is very much, for most of the game, he is very much like a Well, I don't want to say most of the game, but for like a fair portion of the game, he is very much like I'm a mercenary and I don't give a shit about any of this. I'm just here to brood and feel badass and be a badass, and that's my whole thing, right? Fine. That's everybody, like, people see that and everybody's just fine with it. That does not make an interesting character, but everybody's fine with it, right? But fast forward to Final Fantasy 13, Lightning is the exact same character archetype. It is Lightning is the exact same thing as Cloud, and everybody shit all over Lightning because just like she's just so wooden and emotionless. It's just like, I don't get it. And it's like, like you were fine with it when it was Cloud, right? But
obviously not in Japan, because Japan fucking loves her.
Yeah.
Her and Vanille. But but no, there's a lot of things that, like, I heard a lot of people shitting on her, and I'm just like, there's a lot of Final Fantasy characters. I mean, like, look at X2 Pain. Like, there's a lot of characters in every Final Fantasy game that fit that I'm a blank slate mercenary. I'm going to be mysterious and be basically emotionless for most of the time, and then it's going to be super impactful whenever I am emotional and give a shit about something.
Yeah.
And that's just a theme. You're right. Like, it's a theme that happens with the Final Fantasy franchise, and even in, like, games like Bravely Default and other Squaresoft games, like, or not Squaresoft, Square Enix games, like, it's a thing. It's a trope in a lot of those, like, Japanese RPGs too, like, of that character. It's just an archetype, and people suck it up. It's just a character.
Yeah.
Not like suck it up. It's just a character because of all our past conversations. But I'm just saying, like, that character fitting an archetype, I don't think is necessarily a problem. It's how it's used and dispensed, and is it glorified or vilified, or, like, how are you doing it's interesting? Like, why is that character stoic, and giving it more nuance? And if you're like, and you're right, if they're going to complain about, like, Lightning, then they should complain about Cloud as well.
Yeah. And, like,
so if you're not complaining about either of them, that's also fine.
Yeah. Because, like, I think they're both fine, really, but it's just like I don't have real affection toward either character. I just feel like the reactions to each of them is interesting, only in that it is predictable. But
the only one I give a shit about is Sephiroth.
Which, like, I don't know why. See, what's funny about, like, as an aside, I think I saw Sephiroth before I ever actually played Final Fantasy VII, and I just assumed he was a vampire. Because he looks like a vampire, so I assumed he was a vampire.
No. I mean, he might as well be. Sephiroth's story, as a Square fan, is so unimportant in, like, of who he is as a person. Fuck it, make him a vampire.
I think, like, that would actually maybe make him cooler if he was.
I mean, we got Valentine, so vampires exist. So, like, fuck it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he's got a cool theme song, and that's really all I give a shit about.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna watch Advent Children after this.
Despair.
Yeah. Drink this water. That's what he did. He's like, come over here and drink this water with me. If you haven't seen that, if you haven't seen that movie, then you have no idea what I'm talking about. But there's a part where a bunch of creepy dudes get these kids to drink this creepy water, and it makes them all sick. And that's the movie.
Yeah. There's also a part where he says, I'll make you feel despair, or make you something about, but he says despair and has his hand like this. So, and, like, you can't see me if you're listening to this, but it's just, like, imagine a hand holding
a brandy glass.
Yeah, just imagine them holding something, but nothing there.
Yeah.
So it was a really big meme for a long time before the term meme was generally used, where it was Sephiroth and someone put a pear in his hand, because it sounds like it says despair.
I get it. I remember that, actually. Despair. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I was like, I'll make you taste despair. And so yeah, that's the thing that always pops in mind is the theme song and pears.
Yeah.
Love Sephiroth and pears. Um, Now I also want to watch Advent Children. But yeah, and I when you brought up this conversation, I was busy doing stuff, but it hasn't been something I've really been thinking about, but I do think it is something that uh should be commended when done well, because it's something that as a society I do feel like we need is men feeling more comfortably vulnerable, especially with other men.
Yeah. That's a big thing, right? Because because like, growing up, like most of my, I feel like I made sure to that I had more than a few friends that were girls because like I felt like I if I was going to talk about how I was feeling with anybody, like it had to be a girl, right? So, and
Yeah.
it wasn't until like I became an adult that I was like I can actually talk about these things with men too. But like when we were younger, like that just wasn't something that you did. And I like,
Because it's not how you're taught to socialize.
yeah. So I'd like to hope that you know boys are being brought up differently now. And they're more comfortable with talking about how they feel with other boys or and not being made to feel weird about it. But I do think though that normalizing that sort of thing in popular media is going to have a huge effect on that stuff, and I think it is important to continue to foster that. And I think that as long as we keep seeing that, then the more normal it will become, and it will be something that people won't have to worry about so much. But uh, in the meantime, I think that it is worth pointing out when it does happen, and as long as if it's done well, then it's always going to be worth celebrating. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Now I got nothing else to add more than that. You summed it up well.
Yeah, it was very
Uh,
succinct.
I almost said the word succinct, but I was like, that's why I went to summed it up well. I was like, I was gonna say you're very succinct.
I sucked it.
But yeah, so that's our show today. You can find us on most podcast apps like Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes. We're also on the YouTubes if you want to see our faces or see me try and mime
Yeah,
holding a pear.
despair.
Uh, and bye, guys.
Later.